You already know what it is, man. This the Watts Report, and I'm your host. I go by the name of E. Watts. And this episode right here, episode 1, is titled, What Went Wrong in Baltimore? So, this episode was brought to you in demand from, the people. They wanted to know, man, what went wrong with Baltimore, man? What happened, Watts? What happened? Why stuff like this and it ain't like that? Well, all the real niggas, a lot of questions being asked about the state of Baltimore. And on this podcast, man, keeping it real is a must. It's always a must. Even when, in today's time, keeping it real ain't always the most popular thing to do. You get shunned for keeping it real. You get blackballed for keeping it real. But ask me, I don't give a fuck. So here I am, coming to bring you that WATTISM. Which real. WATTISM is the speech, thoughts, and actions that's here to elevate, motivate, and of course, educate you on a real life level from your boy E. Watts. So that's what WATTISM is. But on this episode, man, we ain't gonna get too deep, but we gonna get a little deep. I'm gonna give you a brief history of, why Baltimore the way it is, or the transitioning of Baltimore, should I say. So Baltimore, of course, Baltimore, Maryland, the 410, man, was known, to be the heroin capital. Our city is kind of different. We is an independent city, so we are not in a county like any other city. So you will hear people referring like, man, that nigga from out the county. So we got our own different little slang and lingo, you know what I'm saying? That type of stuff, So Baltimore, the state of Baltimore. It's crazy, man, because I'm going to go a little bit deep, but shallow at the same time, And I'm only coming from what happened to Baltimore on a street level because, of course, that's something more I could relate to. So what went wrong in Baltimore? First and foremost, I'm not even going to use the word went wrong. I'm going to just say what transpired because the streets never remain the same. That's the problem. People be wanting things to remain the same the way it once was, and it's nothing ever going to be the same. Everything evolves. So you got a group of dudes that was probably, in the 70s, in the 80s in the streets. When the 90s came, they was like, man, shit ain't the same. The dudes that was in the 90s, in the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, now they looking like, man, this shit ain't the same. But, what I will say, I think the further you went back in time, I think man was stronger. Man was able to endure certain things. It was just kind of like a different thing, to be like the uphold. And the further back you went, men didn't cooperate with police. Police were seen as the enemies because, the further back you go, it was riots. It was kind of like blacks versus the police. So cooperating with the police was like a super no-no. You really fucking with the enemies. So that's how further back in time you go, people wasn't cooperating with the police. It was like that was a super duper no-no. And I think that kind of played a little part. People forgot what it was like to, be at war with the law, and stuff like that, So you started adapting officer friendly, and stuff like that in my era, in school, But to this day, it's definitely still a disconnect, with law enforcement in, the inner city. So when I'm going to say what happened to Baltimore or what transpired, I'm going to first and foremost say the music, man. The music. So you got in the 80s, the music was, it was more so like the music felt good. It was party time. It was let's get money, let's shine, big dookie ropes, let's go down Old Owls, the Underground, Golfies, Gatsby's, whatever, dudes went at to really show off what they doing, and it was slick. They still was getting high. It was slick to sniff dope. You know what I'm saying? Out of the $100 bill and, stuff like that. So it was still getting high. So I'm not even going to say that's what went wrong because people always was getting high, even back in the days, off of, sniffing coke, well, mainly sniffing dope. That was, something even back then. But I'm gonna say the music. So the music, you know, it was of course Rakim and them, Run DMC, you know what I'm saying? It was on some B-boy shit. And the money was plentiful. It was a lot of money circulating, you know, on the street level, a lot of money. So people was doing 60s, 100,000 a day, one shop, 60,000, 40,000, 30,000. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about every day. That's just one shop. And there was multiple shops in every neighborhood. So, you know, the money was plentiful. Everybody, you know, even further back you go in time, the competitiveness was even different. You know, if yo bust out with the Z, yo might say, man, you know what? Yo just went and got the Z. I'm going to get the Cressida with the B's on it, or I'm going to get the Maxima. You know, certain different things, man. They was competing differently, you know, further back. Everything was kind of like, you know, getting money was a sport. You know what I'm saying? So it became to getting money was a sport too. It started getting a little violent, of course, you know, coming into the 90s, you know, started getting a little violent. The music started changing, you know, you got the different culture of music changing, you know. And I'm going to say New York had a major influence, you know, on our culture, you know, the music, you know, everything, you know, down to even the way we dressed in the 90s. Because I think the 80s, you know, Baltimore kind of had its own identity as far as, you know, bikie shorts and, you know, different stuff like that. The style of, you know, dress was kind of different, but the music started really, you know, influencing the culture, you know, in Baltimore. So in the early 90s, you know, you got Biggie, you know what I'm saying? You got different, you know, it was more edgy. It was more the grimier look was starting to come in. You know, you got Wu-Tang, we started dressing with baggy clothes and, you know, Super Tims and Timberlands and, you know, all that started coming in, you know, in the early 90s, 92, 91, 94, you know, all that, you know, the music kind of like dictated the way people act. You know, that's just WATTISM. So, you know, it was a lot of money still, you know what I'm saying? It was starting to be violence because I want to say 1993 was like our year of the highest murder rate. Like 93, they was really getting it in the 93. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, they was laying it down. You know, the people, the music changed. You know, Biggie will tell you, man, like, you know, Lord niggas want to set me up. When they, you know what I'm saying? Like, Biggie was on point, like how it was going. You know what I'm saying? Stupid motherfucker tried to do Kung Fu instead of scrapping. You know what I'm saying? What happened? Mac 10, you know how it go. That's what went on, you know. Things started changing, you know. All the fist fights and all that. People were still at fist fights a little bit, but some people were starting to play with the guns, and the people that were starting to play with the guns was sticking out a little more. So they'd go, you know, over to jail. They had T-section for the hoppers, you know, stuff like that. So the further back, it was money. It was still violence, but it was a lot more money, and it still was a lot more unity. So, you know, it wasn't a lot of feds in our town, you know, around then. So it was probably people catching federal cases, mainly like bank robbers, you know, certain different little stuff like that. And you had to really kind of be standing out back then to go with the feds, which I want to say it was such thing called fed material back then. So you had to be sticking out to kind of go with the feds, like, you know, like how like old school legends like Peanut King and them, they been went with the feds, you know, Warren Bordley and them, like different crews, you know, was going with the feds, you know what I'm saying, in the 80s. But it wasn't like that, you know what I'm saying? Feds wasn't in our town like that. So the money was still around, you know. So, you know, this around when I think Kurt Smoke wound up being the mayor then. You know, Schaefer was the mayor in the 80s, beginning 90s, and then it was Kurt Smoke. So Kurt Smoke, you know, of course he had, you know, the city that reads. That was his whole little mantra. That was his whole thing. Even though we considered the city that bleeds, you know what I'm saying? Because Baltimore definitely was, it was turned, you know. It was, like I said, it always have been turned. So that's why I don't want to say what went wrong far as things remaining the same, because you got some older dudes that might was hustling in the 70s and the 80s. When the 90s came around, they said, man, what's going on, man? Shit ain't the same, man. These young dudes, like, you know. So bottom line, a lot of what went wrong is a lot of good men starting to they was getting taken off of the streets, and it was leaving little homies to be looking up to the big homies, which was only about 2 years older than them. So that went wrong. That's one thing I want to say what went wrong. A lot of the older dudes, you know what I'm saying, that really had some guidance, but they might have fell victim to sniffing dope and all that. So we started probably looking at them like dope fiends and stuff like that. Or a lot of, you know, older dudes started going to jail. So a lot of people, big homies, was only like 2 years older than them. So that's like the start of the blind leading the blind, when you don't really have too much wisdom of the streets. You kind of like new in the streets like me, and I'm looking for you for guidance. So that started going wrong. You know what I'm saying? That started, you know, being like the downfall. I'm gonna say, I ain't gonna say started going wrong. That started taking even more of a twist to like where is that now, which I don't like where is that now. And I'm gonna get to it. Whereas though I think the major reason why we at where we at now. But so I'm still going to just catch you up in time. So, you know, the mid 90s, you know, going towards the end of the 90s, the music has changed. You know, of course, Pac, I'm going to say Tupac, I'm going to say West Coast Tupac. West Coast was Suge Tupac, should I say, because he was West Coast before with, you know, Digital Underground. But that ain't had an impact as if, you know, that Suge Knight Tupac did, you know, when that All Eyes on Me CD dropped. That was 96, I think early 96, maybe like February, something like that. I know that I remember this CD vividly because this one I really start jumping off the porch doing a lot of illegal things. You get what I'm saying? So when you got back then, even when I was like 12 and I was turning 13 around that time, you know what I'm saying? Because this that time frame, I wanted to hook school and hustle, but back then, the older dudes was, shorty, go the fuck to school. What the fuck, man? You know, man, go the fuck to school. Nah, you gotta roll out. So it was two reasons. They knew that I would bring heat even being outside. You know what I'm saying? Police keep coming through, you know, on some truancy shit. You know, I'm hooking school. And they genuinely knew they wanted young niggas to get right. They ain't want them to follow the same path because they knew the path. It was, you know, either dead or in jail. That's what the streets really brung to you.